All right, welcome back to KUTV Primetime News. You're joining us for the second part of our conversation tonight, which is indeed a conversation that revolves around climate justice. And of course, if you have had a hard time looking at it, I want to read something to you courtesy of UNEP, where our guests will take it even deeper. But something interesting for the UNEP, where climate justice is a term used for framing global warming as an ethical and political issue, not just an environmental issue or a physical issue. That's all I have to say for now, because my guests are here and they are loaded with information, and more specifically about the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice. That is coming next week from Monday, from the 3rd, that is Monday the 3rd of July, all the way to the 15th of July. The chief guest who is opening the ceremony will be the Minister for Education, the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Ezekiel Machogu, to make sure that we get to launch this amazing platform where people come together to talk about climate justice. And I'm joined by very interesting people who are going to be helping me to understand what is happening in this in the space of climate justice, and and global warming, and how it has shaped what we have right now and what we need to do to start undoing. I'm joined by Charles Mwangi, who is in this particular setting right now, who is the head of programs and research at PACJA, and I will be joined by Omar. I don't know if she's available online already, who is a climate scientist. I can see her already. Manar, how are you this evening? If you can hear me. Manar, Omar, if you can hear me, kindly enable your sound. But even as we prepare for that, Charles Mwangi, Head of Programs and Research at PACJA, it's a pleasure to have you and an honor to have you in this particular sitting tonight. And let's go deep and let's just go into it even as we wait for Manar to join the particular conversation as far as audio is concerned. Let's get to understand what is PACJA, what is Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice, and what have you done so far, and what is the importance of this, especially when you're pushing people who are going to take this to the next level.
So thank you so much, and thank you so much for hosting me in this show. We are, of course, very, very grand of the collaboration that we've had with KUTV in the last editions of Summer School. And I want to say that Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance is actually a coalition of civil societies in Africa. So we have 51 countries in Africa, and we have more than 1,500, civil society organizations within this alliance. Now, we came to be in 2008 in Johannesburg, South Africa, when like-minded, African, colleagues, came together, and they thought it's important really to unpack the entire, conversation and concept of climate justice and interpret it from the African perspective, because Africa is one of the continents that is really mostly impacted by the impacts of climate change, even though it is a continent that contributes least to the global greenhouse gases emissions. And we thought, therefore, it's important, to have, a civil society, network that really called for climate justice, in which case, of course, we talk about those who have contributed to this challenge should actually be able to take lead in terms of addressing this particular challenge. So we've been there, therefore, for all those years, and our work, of course, spans across, various constituencies. We have our sub-national, platforms in the countries. We have national platforms operating at that particular level, but we also have regional components of our work, where, of course, we work with other Pan-African institutions, like the African Union, like the Pan-African Parliament, and several others, including the African Development Bank, to really push for policies, push for issues that are going to help us in terms of addressing climate change and calling for justice, for the African people first and foremost.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that particular introduction. And maybe as we move forward in this particular conversation, something that is very eye-catching is your tagline for this particular? I don't know if it's for this particular year or is it for Nairobi Summer School. You're gonna shed more light onto that, but connecting ideas and shaping narratives as far as this climate justice is concerned, and you are very particular in empowering the youth as spearheaders of this particular movement. How is that going, and how exactly are you bringing the youth together and connecting the ideas that come from all over Africa and pushing this narrative forward?
Thank you so much. Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice really is a very innovative idea that we come up with as a Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. And this idea was conceptualized in 2019. Upon realization that Africa, has a majority of its population really, or the biggest proportion of its population, comprises of young people. But these young people in the continent, they don't have the right mentorship. These young people, they remain an asset that is not utilized, in terms of bringing or catalyzing, development, within Africa. And we thought because there's that particular gap, we needed to empower our young people, particularly give them the understanding of climate justice in our own context. And that's why we're talking about shaping, narratives. Because we have to tell our story, first and foremost, as African people. Because they say the wearer of the shoe is the one who knows where it pinches most. And therefore, in 2019, we thought of coming up with this particular program, where then we'd expose our young people, with the right concepts, around climate justice, in terms of basically what is a global, discourse around climate change. What are some of the local probable solutions so that they can actually be able to take up and probably be able to bring the change, that is needed, so that we don't see them as victims only, but we also see them as change agents. And in 2019, we thought that probably would actually be able to plan that particular school and implement it, in 2020. But COVID-19, came around, and we were unable to actually launch, Nairobi Summer School in 2020 as we had planned. And therefore, our first edition, our inaugural Summer School on Climate Justice, therefore, was hosted in this very university, in 2021. And I want to say that this is really a partnership, that brings together, partners from across, the globe. Universities, from across the globe. Of course, we have Kenyatta University, as our main partner here. We have University of Nairobi. We have University of West Cape. We have several other universities across Africa, but also beyond. And we also bring together, experts, from various sectors, because we don't want to hold this summer school as just a normal academic, sort of an exercise. We bring in even practitioners in the field, because it's more or less a mentoring, sort of a school. And I want to tell you that we have seen a lot of fruits coming from this particular school. We were in Germany just a few weeks ago, actually about 2 weeks ago, and I can tell you, majority of the young people that were attending, SBI meetings that happened in Bonn, in June, were really, the graduates of our school. Some of them are actually now negotiating for their countries. We have a case of a girl by the name Saone in Botswana, who is actually now negotiating on agriculture, and she's a beneficiary of the second edition of Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice. So it is really a transformational kind of a school, and I want to say that this year we received an overwhelming, number of applications. We actually got almost 2,000 applications, and the interest, span beyond Africa. Actually, we had 73 students from 73 countries applying for that. And therefore, you realize, of course, majority will be from Africa, but we've also been able to take some students from part of the Global South, but also part of Global North, because we believe it's important really to build a movement and a strong movement of young people who are actually spearheading, climate justice discourse in Africa, because we have that, the demographic advantage.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Allow me to loop in Manar Omar, who is now joining us virtually. And Manar, if you can hear me tonight, welcome to the broadcast. Manar Omar is a climate scientist, and we need to see later in this conversation how science actually comes into play. She's also the founder and CEO of something very interesting that is called Springs of the Arid and Semi-Arid lands. She's going to be telling us all what that is all about. But even as you do that, what are the challenges? Charles has been sharing with us the the engagement and how PACJA is engaging the young people in this particular movement. What are the challenges and opportunities that you have discovered in the process of doing this?
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, so allow me to just ask what you've asked about the challenges and opportunities. Is it for the summer school?
Yes, for the summer school and the overall engagement of the young people as a huge part of this particular movement.
Okay, so I'll start by saying that I was part of the summer school last year as the second cohort, and I see this as a very great opportunity for youths to learn, because using my example, like when I was starting or joining this summer school, I had I wasn't really equipped with the knowledge around climate justice very well. I just had basic knowledge on this, and after that after the summer school, I was motivated to move forward and pursue and even learn more about climate justice, because it was like an eye-opener. Mm-hmm. So I can say PACJA is offering an opportunity for youths to discover themselves in the field of climate justice or climate change at large. And also the opportunities that are there is that, you see, PACJA has supported a number of youths in this same climate justice summer school, where after the summer school, they've supported different people or youths to pursue or to further make their work successful. Like we know other youths who are using music to to move forward the narrative of climate justice. Like myself, I'm working with communities in the arid and semi-arid lands through an NGO that I founded, and it really made me stronger. So I can say those are some of the opportunities, and I don't know if there's any challenge that I can really echo from this, because apart from having youths participate in person, there's also opportunities for people to participate online, and I could see that from the time I was in the summer school. So yeah, I think that's what I can echo about that. Thank you, and back to you.
All right, thank you so much for that detailed experience, even as member of the cohort 2 of the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice. Now we go back to you, Bwana Charles, and as the head of programs and research, I believe you're one of the people who are mostly involved in the advocacy and the discussions around this particular issue of climate justice, and involving 51 countries, as you have put it. What are some of the things that have come up even as you engage? What are some of the policies you have formulated as you continue to engage member states and general members of your movement?
Thank you so much. Climate change is actually a discourse really that is global, but that can also be seen, from the local context. And you realize that a lot of work, especially around, policies, is multifaceted. We have been working very closely, of course, with local, governments. Like in Kenya, for example, we have a county as the local jurisdiction, and we've been supporting a number of counties, in terms of coming up with their climate policies or their climate laws, to ensure that at least climate issues are actually entrenched, within their systems and their systems of laws, and again to ensure that they are also, allocating some resources, to address climate change, from their budgets, and several countries are doing that, and the same is also replicated in many other countries, across Africa. But also at a national level, it's important to realize that countries, of course, have got some commitments, and global, commitments, to address climate change. And I want to talk about one document, for example, that we call, the NDCs, or the National Determined Contribution, which is a blueprint, submitted by every country at the UNFCCC, indicating the strategies and the measures that country is planning from their own, internally informed, decisions, to cut the emissions into a certain particular percentage. But again, the strategies we want to put in place in terms of addressing, the entire concept of climate change. So our work, therefore, first and foremost was to support countries in terms of coming up with proper NDCs documents. We've been involved also in terms of reviewing the NDCs, because of every 5 years, of course, there is a review of the same. The first review actually happened in 2020 for many countries, and our platforms in the countries were really deeply engaged in terms of contributing, to issues that are critical and that we think are important, in those particular documents. But also at national level, most of the countries have also what we call, national climate change action plans. They also, what they call, adaptation plans. And all these documents are very, very important, in terms of, providing, the legal framework and policy framework that is necessary, for us to roll out, climate change, initiatives. But it's important to note that there's a difference between having good policies and implementation part of it. And we are always accused of that. In Africa, we come up with very nice policies, Kenya being a very good example. But when it comes now to implementation and rolling out those particular proposals and those particular policies, it becomes very, very, very difficult. And that is not just in Africa. We have seen this also in the global arena, where countries commit, particularly the developed countries. We have seen a lot of commitments, and one of the common ones is the 100 billion commitment, which has never been honored. Commitment to provide climate finance to support the countries that are most affected by impact of climate change, for them to be able to build their resilience. But that money has not always been forthcoming. You realize that within the global arena, there is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is the forum under which, countries and parties that are signatories, and most of the countries in the world are actually under that, come together, and every year, of course, they negotiate issues, regarding climate change, and how to come up with the strategies and mechanisms of ensuring that we have come up with strategies that are going to help us in terms of addressing climate change. But then you realize in those negotiations, Africa is always at a disadvantage. And of course, many other developing countries, because the developed world, even though they have an obligation, to support in ensuring that the countries that are developing, have been cushioned against the impact of climate change, you realize that there is always, a lack of that political goodwill. And therefore, you realize that in most of the themes of the negotiations, including adaptation, which is very, very critical for Africa, there hasn't been a lot of attention in terms of doubling finance that is required to support adaptation. And you realize there's a very big gap between what is actually needed on the ground and what is actually available. And even what is available, it becomes also very difficult to access the same.
Thank you very much for that. And of course, as you spoke about policy, I feel I want to ask a question to Manar, who I believe is still listening to us in this particular conversation. Manar, I want to loop you in on the part of policy and how it comes into contact with science. You're a climate scientist yourself, and I'm sure you're still part of the advocacy team that is really pushing Nairobi Summer School for Climate Justice and PACJA's work in general to the next level. Scientists, to some extent, want to handle things their own way, but we need advocacy. Where do the two meet, and how do they work together to ensure that the information we get from this side and the research we do from this other side get to push the narrative forward?
Thank you so much. So what I can say is that personally, as a climate activist, on a personal level, that is, and along the scientific part, or the scientist in me, because I'm just a recent graduate from school and all that, I can say that advocacy strongly relies on science and evidence from research. So I think science and research, as you mentioned, is really critical in informing advocacy, because even as climate activists, we go to climate conferences, or we are present in these climate decision-making processes to push for certain agendas that we think are critical for our own countries. So, for instance, discussions around loss and damage. Most of us, like me, for instance, I was at the Bonn International Climate Change Conference, and we were pushing forward the narrative of indigenous pastoral communities who we feel are extracted from climate decision spaces, yet being most affected by climate change. Another aspect of climate justice, we need to...
Right, we seem to have lost Mana Omar as she completed her point. Bona Charles, time is not with us, and we are coming to the very close of this particular conversation. I just want to give you 1 minute to tell us, the cohort 3 is here with us already, starting from Monday. What are your expectations, and what are you looking forward to, to see come to fruition?
Thank you so much. This cohort 3 is perhaps going to be the most exciting cohort. We have more than 300 students who are attending this course physically in KUT for 2 weeks. And we have another 500 that will be joining, from the various places in the world, virtually. And like I mentioned earlier, you can imagine our core, which we did not run for a very long time, attracted close to 2,000, applicants. And what is interesting is that the applicants came from all over the world, both from the global north and global south. And we had a difficult task, really, of selecting, and shortlisting really candidates that would actually come in for that particular course. So you can see there is a lot of interest. In Africa, it's only about 4 countries which didn't apply. So you can imagine how effective this process has been, and the interest, this school has actually sparked, among the young people, which is to us is very, very exciting, and meaning that we really have a lot of work to do in terms of making sure that we reach as many young people as possible. So we start on Monday. We have the symposium that is coming up on Monday, and the Minister of Education, Ezekiel Machogu, will be the chief guest. And of course, now from there, we of course have 2 weeks, of engagement. Now we are looking forward, to engage with these young people. We have actually selected our list of persons very, very carefully. And they're also coming from across, the globe, and most of them are seasoned, activists, we and experts, in the discourse of climate change. And we really want to be as practical as possible. We want to produce yet another cohort, of activists, in Africa, and we believe that whatever we're doing is really going a long way in terms of supporting, our young people and building, their capacities, because they're the leaders not of tomorrow, but of today. But going forward, we're also thinking about how can we probably be able to immortalize, this particular course. By embedding it, in the school curriculums, at tertiary level, but also at elementary level, because it's important to start, early enough. Because climate change is here with us, and from the look of things, it may continue if we don't, for quite some time if we don't act. And we have our young, people, and these young people from Africa particularly, I believe, they are the ones who are going to provide the solutions that we need, in terms of going forward. They're the ones who are going to really ensure that Africa really gets justice, in matters climate change. So we welcome all, to follow, the deliberations and how the school is going to roll out. But we believe and we hope really this is going to be much better. We have taken our lessons from the first 2 cohorts, and this can only be better than the last 2.
Amazing. I can attest to that because I attended your first event. I actually covered your first event, and I'm looking forward to seeing how cohort 3 turns out. So thank you so much for joining us in this particular wonderful conversation. That is Charles Mwangi. Sorry for calling you Charles Minor as we began the conversation. I have a friend who is called Charles Mwangi Minor.
I have a son by the name Minor, so it's still okay.
That's good. That's wonderful. So we come to the close of the conversation. Thanks to Mana Omar, who was able to join us. Can you tell us your final parting shot, even as we end this conversation? Kindly, Mana Omar, I'm told you're back. Kindly engage your sound.
Yeah, I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
Amazing. I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm really sorry for the intermittent network because we're at the village doing fieldwork, so I'm trying to juggle in between the available network. So I think my parting shot would be like, Pakde is really doing a good work with the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice. And I think it's a really brilliant idea to not only for seasoned activists, but rather for grassroots activists who are working and doing incredible job on the grassroots level with the most affected communities. And I think they deserve this space. And thank you to the organizing team, and thank you for also having us here.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's Mana Omar, climate scientist, founder of Sasal, SASAL. You can Google that. It's Springs of Arid and Semi-Arid Lands. Perfect way to end this particular conversation. Thank you so much to Charles Mwangi, Baba Maina, for coming to the conversation tonight. Thank you so much for staying tuned and allowing us to have this conversation. Climate justice, it concerns you, it concerns me, it concerns all of us. We take a very short break right here. We come back with more. Don't go anywhere. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.